We can now authorize corporations to take property from private individuals as long as the private corporation says, okay, well, we're going to build this whole complex and you will get tax revenue because of this complex. Even the Supreme Court says, oh, well, then you can take that through eminent domain, and you can do it with just giving the people $1. So the ideas of public use have been completely transformed and negated from its original intent. And the principle of just compensation has also been completely destroyed by public-private partnerships and this unholy marriage between corporation and government. And when government can have an unholy marriage with corporation, then the rights of the people are trampled. These corporations exercising this quasi-governmental power are actually then protected from civil lawsuits. And then that gives them the status of an untouchable robber baron. They can come in and take your property and then use the force of government in their private means.
And check in with Riley Carson. Riley, a devastating day of violence in Iraq yesterday.
Yeah, Paula, at least 45 protesters were killed in clashes with security forces, and the violence has continued this morning with one person reportedly killed. On Thursday, troops opened fire, killing nearly 30 demonstrators in Nasiriyah who had staged a sit-in blocking off 2 bridges. Protesters later burned tires near an army checkpoint and marched through the streets carrying coffins. 12 others died in an attack on the Iranian consulate in Najaf, the second attack on an Iranian consulate in the country this month. More than 400 protesters have been killed in Iraq since the unrest began 2 months ago. Police in Italy have arrested 19 far-right extremists on charges of trying to start a neo-Nazi party. The countrywide police raids, called Operation Black Shadow, netted guns, explosives, and a range of Nazi paraphernalia. Prosecutors say the suspects had made contact with other neo-Nazi groups outside Italy, including in Britain and Portugal. Under Italian law, it's a crime to establish a fascist party or defend fascism. And Zimbabwe is teetering on the brink of man-made starvation, according to the country's United Nations envoy. Hilal Elver says close to 60% of the population doesn't have reliable access to food. Women and children are bearing the brunt of the crisis, with many infants under 2 not getting enough to eat. Drought, economic sanctions, and hyperinflation are compounding the problem in the country. The agency is calling on the national government and the international community to take immediate steps to help improve the situation.
Gut-wrenching fire at a safari wildlife park in Ohio. At least 10 animals killed, including 3 giraffes. A fire breaking out in a barn on Thanksgiving. A warning, some of the images may be disturbing. Here's ABC's Gio Benitez.
Tonight, a devastating fire at a wildlife park in Ohio. Giraffes running around inside an enclosure as the barn goes up in flames.
So one of the barn's on fire. There are animals inside.
Some animals were able to escape the barn. Still, 10 exotic animals were killed.
In Albania, at least 13 people have been killed and hundreds more injured in the most powerful earthquake to hit the country in decades. The 6.4 magnitude quake struck 30 kilometers northwest of the capital, Tirana, causing buildings to collapse and sending panicked residents out onto the streets. It's the second earthquake to hit the country in 2 months.
Climate activists around the world are taking to the streets in the 4th global climate strike today. They're demanding that governments step up their efforts to further cut carbon emissions. Now, demonstrators in Australia kicking off the day of protests planned in cities around the world. In Sydney, hundreds skipping school for a rally outside the City Hall in a march. They were joined by victims of the bushfires that have been ravaging parts of Australia.
We are losing the race. emissions are growing. There are 2 reports that were recently published with the emissions are not being reduced. We have the highest concentrations of CO2 in the atmosphere. Only millions ago we had the same situation, but at the time with the higher temperatures and a much higher level of the sea. We have seen in today's emission gap report of UNEP that we are at serious risk to not to be able to meet the limit of 1.5 degrees at the end of the century, and that would be catastrophic. So it's time to understand that we need to be much more serious with political will to be able to defeat climate change.
And the third angel followed them, saying with a loud voice, "If any man worship the beast and his image, and receive his mark in his forehead or in his hand, the same shall drink of the wine of the wrath of God, which is poured out without mixture into the cup of his indignation."
To bring more awareness on climate change. The topic is becoming ever more popular, with a lot of people getting in on the act, including Hollywood stars, activists, politicians, and European Union lawmakers. Recently, the European Union even went as far to declare a state of climate and environmental emergency.
If there's one area the world needs our leadership, it is on protecting our climate. This is an existential issue for Europe and for the world.
Canadian investigators are working to identify the 7 people on board the 6-seat Piper Cherokee that crashed Wednesday and piece together why the 54-year-old single-engine plane went down.
Do we need to go into the thingy? Do we need to do the...
It took Minneapolis firefighters just 30 minutes to get the 14th floor fire under control, but not before heavy, choking smoke permeated several floors.
That's an officer slamming a man to the ground yesterday on Chicago's South Side. The man appears motionless after his head hit the concrete. The brief video does not show what led to the confrontation. Police say the 29-year-old had been drinking and the officer performed an emergency takedown after the man verbally threatened the officer, licked his face, and spit in his eyes.
Okay, let me ask you a question. Why do you still hold these Nazi ideals?
You got any better ones?
You believe the U.S. government should be overthrown, yet you're relying on the charity of others and potentially the charity of taxpayers.
Guerrilla warfare, man. Guerrilla warfare. You got to take what you have to get what you need. This is James Mason. He's a lifelong neo-Nazi, and today he's an advisor to one of the most violent white supremacist groups in America. Individuals linked to the group known as the Atomwaffen Division have allegedly carried out 5 murders in 2 years. They've been arrested for weapons possession and bomb plots. Mason says he's not a part of the group. And while he's not been charged in connection with these crimes,
James Mason is a key figure within this movement and this subculture. He's put on a pedestal along with Timothy McVeigh or Anders Breivik, who killed 77 people in Norway.
we first started looking at Mason in September, when foreign intelligence experts told us he and his book Siege were influential to multiple far-right extremists they'd been tracking in Europe. The book glorifies Adolf Hitler and serial killer Charles Manson and calls for the violent overthrow of the government to usher in a new racist society.
And those who embrace siege culture advocate for the most violence, the most destruction, and the most clandestine approach to targeting your victims.
Oh my God. Oh God.
It's been a tough 3 years for the Devlin family.
Hasn't rained, but we're just used to it now. Like, we've been in it for, what, 3 years?
Yeah. 15-year-old Lachlan and 12-year-old Murray spend most days after school working on the Burraway farm. Forced to step up from a young age, they've witnessed firsthand the toll the big dry has had on their parents, Elizabeth and Andrew.
Tractors display the message to the president. Macron respond, save your farmer. Farmers want to draw the government's attention to stagnant revenues that they blame on government reforms, excessive regulations, and the import of cheaper agricultural produce from abroad.
Prices aren't keeping up. Our costs are rising and our income is falling, even though this year the harvest was good. But the prices mean we can't make a decent living from our work.
New data shows women really could be more predisposed to marriage. Of more than 2,000 same-sex marriages recorded in Queensland until October, 62% were female couples. There's a similar pattern across the country. Of 6,500 gay marriages in 2018, 58% were lesbian couples. Western Australia topped the nation with 66%.
home for 10-year-old Dia Malhous and his 14-member family. Before Israeli jets bombed it, now it's a pile of broken concrete and twisted metal.
Still out in force, blocking streets leading to the Georgian parliament, after using water cannons and clashing with opposition supporters.
The region has been hit by severe drought. More than 60 elephants have died in the southern African nation over the past 2 months.
Déjalo que se baje.